Hello, and welcome to my review of the found footage horror film Grave Encounters. Now, Grave Encounters is about a team of people that go into a supposedly haunted psychiatric hospital to film a TV show called Grave Encounters. And Grave Encounters is kind of like a Most Haunted kind of thing. So the team goes in, they give them some history about the place, film some stuff, record some stuff, and then try and find any paranormal stuff. But as this team soon finds out, this hospital they go into isn't fake. There's some really haunted stuff going on here, and it's about them documenting it and trying to escape, basically. So, in summary, I like Grave Encounters. Grave Encounters does have a lot of stuff it could have improved on, but in general, I think it's a decent enough horror film. So let's start with the positives. Grave Encounters is surprisingly well acted. This, I don't know if it's got a cinema release or not outside of a few festivals or exclusive screenings, but yeah, this is a really well acted film. A lot of very convincing performances. A very convincing film in general, because something that they tell you in the film is this film takes place before anything like Most Haunted or anything like that came along. And Most Haunted, I know, was around like early 2000s. So it's kind of, I'm thinking like late 90s maybe, mid 90s. And it does a decent enough job of actually telling you or portraying the fact it's in the late 90s. Like nobody's using an iPhone or anything. There's one guy pulls out this Nokia phone, and it's one of those really old ones. I don't want the brick type ones that you can kill someone with, but one of the one of the ones that doesn't have a colour screen and it's got like a really weird green backlight to it. One of those types. So that was a nice touch that the film had. Also, it does what every horror film should do pretty well. It is quite scary at times. It does rely on jump scares quite a bit, but the film does create a very unsettling atmosphere. And there are times where you kind of want to maybe look away. And there's also, it's not a particularly gory film, but there's some really cool sort of bloody moments in this film. And as with many horror films, that's really as much as I can say as far as positives goes. As far as positives go, sorry. It's, as far as a found footage film goes, it's not immensely convincing, because as you can think of with found footage horror films, there's all sorts of things that come into effect about whether or not it looks real or not. This does a fairly good job of being convincing, but there's like I said, there is some things you can improve on. For example, the film's story really only develops for like the first half hour, at which point it is just scares and scares and scares and scares, and gradually the members of this crew being picked off. There really is no story development after like the first half hour, because the story goes, they go to this place, they interview some people, they go into this place, and then one of the crew members goes missing, they try to escape, and it turns out they're completely lost in this asylum. And I mean, psychiatric hospital, but there really isn't any difference, to be honest. I don't think, anyway. It could be. But yeah, it doesn't, there's no development in the story, nothing new happens. They kind of explain what's going on in the place, in that, I won't say actually, because that would kind of spoil things. I really don't want to spoil a film. So, yeah, this plot doesn't really go anywhere after like half hour in. It's just scares, which isn't a bad thing, but with horror films you kind of want a bit more to it. Like, you don't necessarily want a start, a finish and an end, but you want, if anything, your start, your middle, and an end spanning the whole film. You don't want that all in the first like half hour, or have you start and your beginning in the first half an hour and then have your end right at the end of the film with like nothing filled in between. Another thing is that I can't. well, this might necessarily not be a bad thing, because the thing is that I think this came out in 2009, and if I'm correct, Paranormal Activity came out in 2007. So, one of the things that kind of bugged me about it is how there were similarities between this film and Paranormal Activity, and even Paranormal Activity 2 maybe, because I'm not sure when Grave Encounters exactly came out. But if I'm correct, it goes, this came out in 2009, Paranormal Activity 07, Paranormal Activity 209, 3 2011, then 4 last year. But I could be wrong. But it does use a lot of things we've seen in other horror films before, like Paranormal Activity, like the Blair Witch Project. But generally that aside, the film in general is pretty good. I mean, it's a decent enough horror film. It is something you can watch, get scared, enjoy. Something that you don't need to take too seriously. One thing I will say though is that this film really does make good use of this building that they filmed in. I mean, the building itself is very much a character, in that it's just so big and just so vast, and all these corridors and rooms in there, and they're all used really effectively and used well in the scares. So you haven't got the same kind of thing going on at the same time in like a corridor. You've got different parts of this building being used to generate different kinds of scares, which is really cool. But if anything, it's another found footage horror film. It does the things you want it to do well, but the things that would really push it forward, it kind of doesn't do that great. So altogether, I'm going to give Grave Encounters 3 out of 5 stars. Now, there is already a sequel for Grave Encounters, surprisingly called Grave Encounters 2. Now, do I want to watch this or not? Actually, I don't. Why? Because from what I've read on Rotten Tomatoes, I saw it, this consensus, is basically what they're trying to do with this is that it's about a film student who is convinced that what happened in Grave Encounters was real. So what I imagine is that this takes place... It would make sense for this to take place in real life, but I think it kind of would take place in the fictional world of Grave Encounters. So the Grave Encounters is released as a film in the fictional world, and then people in this fictional world are like, right, that's real. It's kind of confusing, and because it's kind of confusing and it doesn't really make sense from the very premise alone, I really won't pay that much attention to the sequel. So anyway, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah. So anyway, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative, and goodbye.